So yeah, as Toby said, I'm Danik Akigama. I'm engineering manager at Enable, where I lead the GraphQL platform team. About 6.5 years ago, I worked on the first GraphQL API at Enable. And today I'm here to talk to you about the second chapter of our GraphQL journey here and how we turned into something that absolutely we didn't plan for. And so this is a story of how we hit 1,300% subgraph growth within 12 months and somehow lived to tell the tale. So go back to 2024, April. We are in contract negotiation with Apollo. So they were asking us, what are your growth expectations? We were like, we have about 10 engineers ready to go, probably have one subgraph in the first 12 months. Conservative, right? And then we were like, if we increase the size of the team, maybe we'll have another subgraph. But ideally, we want to have at least one subgraph in production. Reasonable, safe. Fast forward 12 months. 14 subgraphs, 85 contributors, and 300 studio users. Now, if you run a platform team, I know exactly what's going through your mind. And this is what it was in our case. So like, how do you manage 300% growth without chaos? So that's the question that kept us up at night. Like, how do you manage this much growth without creating chaos? We were planning for one subgraph and suddenly having so many people depending on our platform. And so that wasn't a scaling problem. That's more of a survival problem. So before I tell you how we survived this, let me tell you why we even bothered with the GraphQL in the first place. So picture this. We're a customer. So you're just basically trying to get offline devices in your network. Sounds simple, right? But here's what our customers were actually saying. Why do I have to make so many API calls just to get one answer? Why do I get so many data points when I get this information back from this API? Sometimes I get like 2,000 fields when I'm only interested in one. And that's a problem for our partners and customers. So as I said, Enable, we are a cybersecurity and an IT management company. So over the years, we have acquired many companies, each with different systems, all serving MSPs, so managed service providers and IT pros, sometimes each with their own APIs. So they all have tons of similarities, but just enough to create this integration nightmare. And for our customers, they just want to access their data through the APIs. So what they said, make it easier for us, they said. Give us better endpoints. Give us more REST endpoints, mostly. But the leadership looked at this problem and took a different direction. And that surprised everyone. It's mostly our customers. We said, no more REST. We are going full GraphQL. So some of you may think, were they crazy or strategic about that decision? But let me tell you what happened next. So after our bet on GraphQL, here's the vision that we set ourselves. Unified platform, everything from product UI to AI would access all our data through one single API. And a single API with infinite possibilities. So no more forcing customers through multiple REST endpoints for even simple answers. But here's what it actually looks like when you try to build it. So we have our apps on the left-hand side and services on the right. Some of these services are brand new services, some of the services that we acquired in the past. So there's quite a lot of things on the right-hand side. And in the middle, we have a big, beautiful supergraph orchestrating everything. So each subgraph sometimes represents a team or a business domain or a function, and all those lines flowing the data between the subgraphs and the teams or the subgraphs. So this is beautiful architecture. But when you try to build something this complex, the question is, how do you build something without chaos? This is where we discovered our secret weapon. Education as infrastructure. So with that in mind, I went to our leadership and I said, if you're going to do this, here's what we need to do. We need to make Apollo Level 2 certification mandatory for everyone. So when I said that, this is what I expected to hear. But they got it, they understood that, So they knew that if we are going to do this properly, everyone needed to speak the same language from the day one. So with their blessing, we made it official. Apollo Level 2 certification, mandatory, no exceptions. So you can't come to the supergraph or contribute to subgraph without the Level 2 certification. So I don't know if everyone's aware of the Level 2 certification or the Odyssey program. Can I see a show of hands? How many have done Level 2 certification? Oh, I expected more, but okay. But yeah, so it really helped us a lot, the Level 1 certification as well as Level 2. For our devs who are contributing to the supergraph, we wanted to make sure that they do the Level 2 certification. But for our PMs and managers, engineering managers, we said to them, you have to do at least Level 1 so they understand what the teams are working on. So Level 2 certification process covers federation principles, so federation architecture principles, system design, resolvers, entities, all the core concepts that you need to know when you're building a supergraph properly. Why this matters? Because when you have the same training, same understanding of GraphQL, and the same, so you can, as reviewers, we can trust the proposals, you know. And for the newer contributors, they are productive from day one. If you really think about it, you wouldn't let anyone deploy anything into your production without a CI/CD pipeline, right? So same principle with the GraphQL knowledge. So with the leadership on board, we went to the engineers. That took some convincing because there were concerns that are like, oh, I have learned something new. I have to go through this process again. But results speaks for themselves. Within 12 months, we had 154 certifications. And out of that, 132 Level 2 certifications. That's 132 people in the organization have the same thinking and understand the federation principle from scratch. So that's education as infrastructure in practice. So instead of hoping people will figure it out along the way, we front-loaded the knowledge. So why we went through all this? Because like I said in the beginning, I worked on the first GraphQL API with the Apollo server and GraphQL modules. And we learned a lot from there. We made lots of mistakes, and we wanted to make sure we don't make the same mistakes this time around. So as they say, discipline can be painful, so is the regret. So we wanted to make sure we follow proper discipline and make sure that everything's done right from the day one. So yeah, certification was just the foundation. Then we did something I'm assuming probably make our Apollo colleagues a bit nervous as well. So breaking the rules. So Apollo recommends this nice orderly process for schema proposals. You go through development, testing, and then to production. Sensible, right? So best practices, follow all the right processes, early detection of any breaking changes. But for us, this traditional approach was creating bottlenecks. So we said, you know what? We're going to do this part our way. So with that, we introduced production proposals with custom checks. So instead of going through multiple proposal stages, like staging and production, we asked the devs to create their proposals in the productions variant, and then we check, validate through custom checks. So why? When you have 132 certified engineers who understand the GraphQL principle, we can trust the process and trust the quality. So the bottleneck wasn't their knowledge, it's our process. So that's what enabled what allowed us to manage 14 subgraphs with just 2 to 3 reviewers. So let me show you how it works in practice. So this is just a very high-level workflow that we have. So you can see everyone needs to propose at this production variant. So the process that we have, you have to have proposal approved before you start any development work. Then you start the development, then it goes into staging or testing. And when you push the changes to testing, our custom check starts kicking in, and then check if it passed or failed. If it failed, back to development. If it passes, then we get deployed to staging. And there, we do the same thing. If it passes, great. If it fails, back to development. So when it passes in Studio, you get deployed to production, and the label gets changed. Based on your changes, it will be partially implemented or fully implemented. So that all happens. And let me show you a bit of the code. So I'm going to show you something that we introduced a few weeks ago. So in our company, all our dev documentation stays in Backstage. And GitHub recently made their GitHub Copilot spaces generally available. So what we did was we connected our Backstage Markdown docs into GitHub Spaces, which means now all our devs can use GitHub Spaces in any IDE, whether it's VS Code or whatever. So because GitHub Copilot supports all the IDEs out there. So they can now have their schema in the IDE and then ask the Copilot to check if it passes the compliance that we have set. So all our schema guidance in GitHub Code Spaces. And I'm not going to run this because you can't trust sometimes the internet. So I've just thought to run it before that. So you can see, so internally we call our GraphQL platform enquery because enable, everything has started with the N. So you can see, like, it says what are the areas that you're compliant, and these are the areas that you are not compliant. And then we have the schema guidance and the section that's coming up saying, like, these are the things that you should follow. And we have the ADRs and everything. So, and one of the things, as you know, devs tend to be not interested in writing as much documentation. I think that's where, again, something like AI can help you with writing the documentation. So we've said it in a way that when you ask for a proposal to be reviewed, the AI or LLM will give you the document that you should write as well, because we have given all the business knowledge to that, so it knows what kind of document it should write. So that sort of cut down the proposal time for us as reviewers, because initially, when the proposal came to us, we spent time, spell checks and all that kind of stuff, which didn't make sense because that's a waste of time. So that's why we thought, like, let's bring the LLMs into the proposal process. So cut down even that time, so then people can put their proposal into Studio in a much more better state. Then we can actually look at how all these things how all this fit into the big picture and the evolution of a supergraph. So that in mind, so I'll just show you. This is the custom check bed. So I'm not going to go through every bit of line of code that we have. I'm just going to show you that it's real and there's a lambda. So that's there. So we have how it works. So we are taking the advantage of Apollo's Graph Platform API. We get all information through that. So I thought instead of going through each line of code, I'll show you a mermaid diagram how this works. So everything starts when the developer making the schema changes, like I said, with the LLMs and all that. So then we have a Lambda function that listens to the webhook that comes from the Apollo API. And then when that webhook comes, we validate the signature for the security, and then parse the schema changes and the schema changes data. Then we go into the analysis stage where we extract the hashes, and then just check, we compare the base schema against the proposed schema just to see, so we can ID the exact subgraph changes and what was the subgraph that was modified. And then we go for the validate stage where we have the proposal variant, and then we resolve the variant. So this is where we try to understand what was changed, and we get that information by looking at the P prefix that all the proposals have. So -P. So we look at that one, and then we understand, okay, this is the proposal that we need to resolve. And then we fetch the actual schema. Then we initialize our schema checks. And then we go into the monitoring stage. So that's another Lambda. So we hand over the validated part into another Lambda functions because we want it to be asynchronous. So rather than blocking our devs doing the work, so every second the Lambda will be polling for workflow statuses, and it checks every second until the workflow completes. And then we pass that information to the result stage where we check the severity of the change. So if it is an error, then we make it fail. And if it is a warning, then we just mark it as a warning, and then we just pass that information to the Apollo callback. So everything goes to Apollo callback, then Apollo callback API then pass that information to the studio. So the devs can actually see the changes or the warning in the studio. So I'll show you quickly how that looks like. So as you can see, example. So yeah, so this is you can see, this is a testing, you can see it clearly. Yeah, so this is a testing variant. Somebody pushed something that wasn't approved. So this comes up saying production proposal check task failed. And it shows you which variant, and that was the one that was gone wrong. And this is that in production. You can see they try to push something that wasn't approved. Approved changes, no matching proposal were found for this change. So that kind of helps us to make sure that you can't push anything into production or into any stage without approved proposal. So everything's checked, like whether it's staging, whether it's development, everything checked against the production proposal, the production variant, sorry. So yeah, and that this loop runs until the workflow completes. So that's basically like continuous integration with the graph. So just to highlight the three things that we are doing there. So two Lambda architecture. So one for receiving and initiating the changes, and one for monitoring, then which prevents the timeouts and keep things responsive. And like I said, it's asynchronous by default, by design. So devs aren't blocked, waiting for checks, and the checks runs in the background. And like I said, production safety, because we always check against the production, regardless of which variant that the devs are working on. So this is the architecture that allowed us to scale from 10 contributors to 85 contributors, and 1 subgraph to 14 subgraphs, while maintaining quality. So this is what happens when you combine education as infrastructure with a smart process. You get speed and quality. And the results, so that helps us to solve the original problem that I mentioned earlier with those multiple calls. So this and we switch back to the slide, please. So thanks. So this is a real case that our customers have today. So it may look simple. So it's like you have one to get the authentication, like your token or whatever, and then you have one API call to get the customer, then another API call to get devices. Then you have this call that you have to call for each device. So that's a problem. So that's like if some of our customers have 30,000, 20,000 devices, so it can scale to many numbers. So in this case, if you have this many devices, that's a lot of calls that they're going to be making for API. And they have to do all these things on their end. Like most of our customers use PowerShell scripts, and they have to do the manual orchestration, error handling, and the client-side filtering, quite a lot of things. And this is the complexity that our customers are dealing with today. So this is a much more simpler example I got, so I can fit into the slide. Otherwise, you get really, really long scripts that the customers are really complaining about. And this is the same in GraphQL. So you can see how simplified that is. And you get it's just one request and exactly the data that they want. There's the beauty of GraphQL. There's no overfetching, there's no underfetching. You get exactly what they want, and that's what our customers are asking for as well. So this is what single API with infinite possibilities means for our customers. So there's no more loops on their end. There's no orchestration that they have to do on their PowerShell scripts. Filtering built into our GraphQL operations, and get exactly what they asked for. So the 100 REST API calls become just one GraphQL query. So a complex script to a simple query, and that's the kind of transformation our platform enables. So just to talk to you guys about the growth numbers, this transformation's made it possible. So this is our 12-month trajectory. So you can see everything starts from April 2024. So the orange line is the number of subgraphs that we had. So at the start, it's just 1, and then it went to 1,300% growth. And the teal line represents the number of contributors. So we started with a 10, as I said, and then went to 85. That's 750% actively building and working on our platform. So if you really look closer, like you can see around September, October area, that's when the certification actually start really making a difference, really paying dividends for us, because people weren't just joining the platform, they were actually contributing quality work and immediately. So that's 14 times subgraph growth in an industry where infrastructure, scaling infrastructure is usually the hardest part. We kind of made it look easy. And so I'd be honest, yeah, it does look like things are easy, but I'll be lying that everything went smoothly, because there are certain stuff that we're still working on. So as I said, yes, we have 132, and today we have more than 132, but everyone is expert now, right? So sometimes when you have so many experts, we have these beautiful arguments about the best design kind of thing. So these things tend to take time. And so we are trying to figure out how to balance the thoroughness with speed. And another problem that we are trying to figure out is the contracts. So some of our teams wants to have preview features. Some of them wants to have experimental features. And we want to make sure that we don't compromise the quality of our supergraph as well and the evolution of it. So that's another problem that we're trying to solve. And then, like I said, our customers are very REST heavy. And for them to come on board with the GraphQL, we need to make sure the entry to barrier is low as possible. So we are trying to figure out how that works. So like some of my colleagues are here who are working on the AI stuff as well, trying to make sure that we bring that barrier down so we can migrate people from the REST usage to GraphQL usage. And so far, the research we have done with our customers, they seem to be eager to get their hands on the GraphQL API, which is good for us. So we feel that we're on the right path. So what can you take from these, even with these challenges? Here are the 4 things that mattered most. Number 1, certification mandatory from day 1. Not optional, not recommended, but mandatory. Treat developer education as critical infrastructure, just like you treat your CI/CD pipeline. Question the conventional wisdom, even if it is Apollo's recommendation, because sometimes that recommendation, opposite side, might work for you better. And use the governance to accelerate, not to gate, because our process didn't really slow us down. It enabled us to move faster with confidence. And plan for explosive growth, not modest. We expected 1 subgraph and ended up having 14. So build your process to handle success rather than just to survive it. So to me, these are not just GraphQL strategies. These are platform engineering principles that work at scale. But here's the real secret that made all possible. We turned governance into competitive advantage, but we are not done innovating. Like I said, our teams are constantly push the boundaries of what's possible, helping us to find ways to go faster without sacrificing the quality. That's what enabled us 300% growth without managing without managing all that with 2 to 3 reviewers. So I'll leave you with this one question. What's your competitive advantage? Thank you.
Hey, thank you for the talk. I was just wondering, what kind of checks are you doing during your proposal checks in the Lambda? How is it proposing the changes to the developers?
So anything that was approved in the production variant that hasn't been, so if they try to propose something that it's not in the production variant, then we just flag it as it's not acceptable. So whatever it is, like even if the document has changed, whether it's type change or whatever, like you can't push anything to production that's not matching. So everything needs to be approved.
Thank you so much for the talk. How do you handle situations where teams want to, like multiple teams want to collaborate on something that isn't in production yet, and they kind of need to develop together before they get there?
That's a good question. That's the kind of problem that we are dealing day to day today as well. So there are loads of teams are pushing us like, we need to experiment things, like even the PMs as well, like, we can't release anything into the public API because first we need to see if that works because we do POC things. So that's a question that we are trying to solve with the contracts. So we have a production contract, the production public contract, and then we have created a internal contract, so for experimental as well. So experimental doesn't go to production, it goes all the way to staging, so you can test everything on the staging environment. And then, that's the other one that we got. Yeah, so we have the preview as well that we're working on as well. So the preview one will allow us to release things into production, but it needs to be, you need to go through the experimental stage, and if you're okay with the experimental level, and then you can go into the preview stage. And that we are still thinking, should we open that as another public API to our partners? So open it to a handful of partners so they can actually see the preview items that are coming into production without going into the public one yet. So similar to what Apollo does as well. So that's a question that we are still trying to solve as well. Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
You said that you had your developers get the level 2 certification. Do you think that's enough? Does Apollo need a level 3, a level 4, or do you feel like it's a comfortable kind of starting block to get going on the graph?
I think level 2 is more than good enough because the struggle was even to get people to certify it. And I think level 1 is quite easy for everyone. I think level 2 is quite easy as well if you have done GraphQL for a long time. But the problem that we had was everyone wants speed and everyone wants to jump in and create things in the supergraph. And the lessons that we learned from the previous attempt with GraphQL was that we ended up having experimental tags for 3 years. Nobody's removing those things. So we wanted to make sure this time, there are more stricter checks and make sure that everyone follows the proper federation principles as well. At that time, we were trying to do federation, but there was no good platform for us because the schema stitching and all that kind of stuff. But now Apollo has matured a lot as well. I think the certification process has helped a lot. I think level 2 is more than enough. But yeah, sometimes maybe like other organizations, people would like to have like level 3 or something that's more advanced. But what I know is that internally you can see people are more eager now to get their certification. Sometimes QAs and people coming out like, can I get level 2? I was like, yeah, it's free. If you want it, you can go ahead. And they put it on LinkedIn, so it's almost status for them as well, which is good.
There's no level 3.
No, that's what I was saying. He was asking there should be another level. Yeah.
Did your customer adoption scale at the same rate? And was there any takeaways from the customer's perspective as you scaled?
So the customers still, it's early adapters right now, so we haven't gone to the level of fully open for them. But so far the interest is there and they seems to be keen on getting their hands on. They're desperate to get more. We are getting more and more customers asking can we be the previewer as well? So yeah, we are not there yet to say always. But the operations, at least the UI level, our operations have surpassed the 1 million mark already. So at least operations are going in the right direction and increasing.
Let's give it up for Danik for a great presentation.